The most important thing is, right, the customer, retailer, brand relationship. We're advising our clients to put even more people in the store to
100%.
build that. And so
there is a backlash to being separated. COVID separated us all. People want connection. We're human beings, and if you want real brand integrity and connect and movement and
experience.
Loyalty and experience, it's people to people. I still think it's still people to people.
Welcome to Clothing Culture, a fashion industry podcast at the intersection of technology and innovation. I'm Emily Lane.
And I'm Bret Schnitker. We speak with experts and disruptors who are moving the industry forward and discuss solutions to real industry challenges.
Clothing Culture is produced by Stars Design Group, a global design and production house with more than 30 years of experience. Welcome back to another episode of Clothing Culture. Today, we are excited to reintroduce a very special guest, someone who truly needs no introduction in the world of retail, innovation, and emerging technology. We are joined once again by Deborah Weinswig, the CEO and founder of Coresight Research, and one of the most respected voices shaping the future of retail globally. We've had the privilege of catching up with Deborah at several industry leadership events over the past couple of years, and every time her insights leave us energized, thinking differently, and just really understanding the landscape in a fresh new way. So we're especially excited to bring that same level of clarity, curiosity, and forward vision back to our audience today. For anyone new to Deborah's work, she leads Coresight Research, a global research and advisory firm known for helping retailers and brands accelerate innovation in a rapidly shifting landscape. Deborah's expertise spans retail and technology, AI, live streaming, retail media, data monetization, and much, much more. She brings a unique global perspective shaped by years as an analyst, strategist, board member, and you know it, best-selling author. Today, we're catching up on all things retail, looking back at the lessons from 2025 and looking ahead at what retailers and brands should be preparing for this year with emerging technology transforming operations. Deborah has a front row seat to it all, and we cannot wait to dive in. Welcome back, Deborah.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here. Nice to see both of you.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got quite a little roadmap mapped out, but before we get too much into thinking about what people need to know in today's landscape, I'd love to get a little insight from you on, post 2025 in our, rear view window. Like what are some of the key takeaways from 2025 that's going to be shaping decisions this year?
Nothing much happened in 2025.
Oh, not at all.
Especially not in this landscape. I mean, it's interesting because I still feel like we're getting questions on tariffs, and I find that surprising, but I think it goes back to everyone kind of had their game face on, but it really did change a lot of how they do things internally, process management, change management, some of the technology. But what's interesting, and I think this will take us into 26, is that we still haven't seen a lot of change in supply chain, which has been interesting. And so I think tariffs threw everybody for a loop. I think that would be number one. Number two, we started off the year with a lot of, or ended 24 going into 25 with a lot of major bankruptcies. And so
yes.
Big Lots, Party City, you had Rite Aid and Joann's. Like those were significant in many ways. I mean, there's a lot of market share for grabs. I mean, I saw a lot of analysis around Party City and the amount of like balloons they had sold, and people who are literally creating like entire businesses around capturing that market share. And that also left a lot of empty boxes as well. And then on the flip side, it was fascinating to see Dollar General and Aldi and Lidl and TJ Maxx and Burlington and Ross stores all opening a significant number of stores. So I would say how we started 25 on the physical landscape, it ended much, much differently. And then I'd say number 3 was like how strong traffic was, right? I mean, depending on what numbers you look at, I mean, the ones we look at, it's up about 5.7% across the board in 25. And I think a lot of retailers, they're kind of like, how do we top that in 26? So I'm sure there's a lot of what we'll talk about today in terms of how they're thinking about doing that. But those would kind of be my top 3.
Certainly more volatility in 2026. Some people go drink when things are nervous, and Americans go shop, evidently.
Right. Well, I think it's interesting that, the seems like the retailers that were on the rise are those that specialize in a discount arena.
Which is so strange when you think about tariffs. I mean, talk about margin pressure. Costs go through the roof, and you still have to sell, a dress for $1 or something. But it's just, it's kind of insane, but interesting.
Yeah, it really was, I think, who's gaining share and who's growing. And then, of course, I'm sure, as we talk about 26, we'll talk about some of the change that's already happened this year.
For sure. We talk about this complicated landscape. Everyone's talking about it. There's tons of this unknown and variability, if I can say that politely for the political pundits out there. AI is this intriguing subject. And people want to remove the guesswork, the unknown from this kind of equation that's constantly moving. There's fears that it can also immediately replace jobs, create higher unemployment, eventually rule the world for some, right? That's, on the far end. Let's break this down to 10 main topics on brands and retailers' minds with respect to current market and technology that we can have your quick insight on. Let's start with the first.
Yeah, I can start with AI demand and forecasting. So this is perhaps the biggest financial lever in fashion and retail today. With inventory between 55 and 70% of a company's working capital, what are clients and the industry in general doing about optimizing inventory? And are there some key insights or technologies that you're excited about?
That, I think, is the question that I think retail has been trying to solve since it started.
Retail began.
Right.
Yeah. It's, and I will say, so I'll run you through this, right? As an analyst, I never understood, what gets sold, right? It leaves the register. I understand not everything's paid for, but you would have a number around what that might look like. And what comes into the back, or at least this is my understanding. But yet there's always out of stocks.
Yes.
And so to me, right, that was like my analyst hat before I ever went to Li & Fung or was more in operations or whatnot. I was like, that was like the fundamental thing I never understood as an analyst is why can't we just have, at least like 98% on shelf availability? And so I think that now it's even more complicated. The demand forecasting, the inventory allocation, once you have it, thinking about sizes is right. We're seeing dramatic changes in sizes. I think it's gotten more complex. There's a lot more tools.
Especially with the push for inclusivity, right?
Yeah.
And then all of these different points of distribution.
Yeah. And it's, and you've got kind of online and offline, right? Hopefully we'll see live streaming at some point, or maybe it's social commerce make a big hit. But yeah, if you've got those 3 channels, and then the other thing is, right, if you buy online and pick it up in store, some retailers that goes through your e-commerce and some that goes through your store inventory. So it's a lot. I think it just, like, the simple problems still haven't been solved.
So with all this exciting AI technology, there's nothing out there that you're excited about to solve this age-old problem.
Well, I was on...
That you can talk about.
I was on a live webinar with Relax, and they're showing how the age... Basically, you can not have a human in the loop, and how the agents can do all of this. And I'm literally... it was so funny. It's like, on the recording, it's like, she's frozen. I'm like, no, I'm not frozen. I said, my mouth is really...
Stunned.
I was stunned because you were watching, right, like a real demo. And you're like, this is kind of what you would think, but it actually is in play. And it's interesting because Relax has only been focused on kind of grocery, CPG, FMCG. and they're starting to move into, apparel, footwear, accessories, which is where the real challenge is.
Yeah.
The out of stock levels are higher, I think is the best way to put it. I know Schnitker has done a lot of really interesting work with apparel, footwear, accessories. I think it goes back to, because I've thought about this. It's interesting we started here. This is the thing. I've thought about this more hours than I care to probably admit, because I always worried that if people went into the store and they continued to not find what they want, that it would negatively impact store traffic. And so I think that, retailers have tried to solve this in many different ways, but we are seeing, there's really interesting technology. The challenge is, right, someone comes in, CIO, CTO, CDO, let's say they choose Schnitker, then they go somewhere else, right? Or they get promoted or whatnot. And then the person who made that decision, maybe somebody else wants to make a different decision or think about how to use Schnitker in a different way.
And that's expensive and time consuming, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I think that ends up being the issue. And that's, I think, the challenge for retailers in general. I think
Is there paralysis down that path? They just don't know where to turn?
I think with AI more generally, we see that because there's this fear or feeling, however you want to look at it, that all the data has to be perfect.
Maybe it's fearling. Maybe it's a new word called fearling. Yeah.
I like that. And I think that the data challenge does cause, analysis paralysis or whatever we want to call it, or fearling. I like that too. And we haven't seen things move as fast as we might have hoped, because I think the technology is now ahead of where we're seeing it being implemented.
Yeah, I always see that. Let's talk about AI personalization and clienting. All brands, especially better in luxury, are focused on trying to attract and grow Gen Z and Gen Alpha. They're seeing issues with this, 80% or more clients today expect personalization. And personalization, we know, increases higher conversion and loyalty. Where on the path are we for this, for mass retailers, better in luxury, specialty? What are the challenges for implementation? We know a few, but where do you see this challenge happening in the whole personalization front? A lot of conversation is going around on this.
It's interesting because Kathy McCabe at Proximity, they tend to work with more prestige-ish. And so, and I know that they've had phenomenal impact on the companies they work with. And, like Lafayette 148, they're always very happy to get out there and tell you like the impact they've had. And she's also just like the loveliest human being ever. So I think that if you're prestige-ish, right, there's a solution. I think it's like for the rest of us, what do we do? And then we're hearing more and more around loyalty, which plays into that, and then gamification, which I love, because hey, I've spent hours on apps trying to like move a little like ball from like, a cup to a cup to a cup to like, get a percentage off. And you realize, right, but it's more just like, oh, I won, right? I'm not. And I think that like, if we can start to bring the fun back in, right? I think that just like we had a very good 25. A lot of companies are starting to talk about gamification.
Yeah.
I think we may just scrape the surface in 26 because it does require a lot of things to be put in place. But if that can set us up for 27, that really, you're talking about like a 3-year amazing story in retail, which would be fantastic.
Yeah, and you talk about fun, experiential retail, however people spin that. And all in all, even with a difficult season or year, retail finished up a little over 1%?
Yeah.
Was it pretty small?
Yeah.
And then you've got tight margins. So there's got to be a way to,
But I think gamification makes perfect sense. Everybody's on their phones all the time.
If Deb Weinswig has the time to move a ball across 3 things to win 10% off,
right,
we can jump on it, certainly.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it also starts to connect you in a different way to some of the brands. And, it could be okay if you could be in a grocery store. If you visit 3 aisles, right, and you take I mean, it's like you could be on scavenger hunts and stuff like this. I mean, we've done all this in China. We just haven't had the ask really in the US or the technology. And so we've seen it, we've lived it. It's just a matter of, I think I feel like you guys spend a lot of time in Europe. I feel like there with personalization and gamification, I think that there's just more of that for whatever reason right now. And I think the US, there's a lot of solid examples for them to look at. It's just a matter of getting started.
Yeah. Moving on to store operations and labor optimization. Labor cost is about 20% of brick and mortar revenue. And with increased demands for store employees to do more, better service, serve multiple roles, manage online returns, et cetera, are we asking too much of the current store employee? Are retailers finding better ways to balance staffing with respect to, reduced overall staffing sizes, increased traffic patterns, and just higher demands?
There's a vendor that I could say something that's not so nice, so I won't say it. I will just think it. But
to the vendor who must not be named.
Yes, exactly. But I remember 10 years ago, right? There were going to be tablets and associates were going to be enabled and they were going to know what to say to what customer and they were going to know the inventory. That was a decade ago. And so now we all have BYOD, and I feel like this is the holy grail. And also too, if we can start to, Carol Tomei always said it the best, right? We're going to move from tasking to selling. I mean, people who work in retail and the stores they work at, they love those stores.
Yeah.
That's why they're there. So if they can have more time to help the consumer find what they want and they love, I will say I'm starting to see early signs at the Gap of, right, I'm doing store tours, but you walk in and you're just being engaged with in a different way. It makes you pause. And I'm like, this is different, right? And I think that once again, they're scratching the surface, right? They've got a new senior leadership team, a new kind of, on the tech side and product side. I think they just hired a chief entertainment officer. That's so cool.
Oh, wow.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay. In-store DJs.
How's technology helping to, kind of enhance this employee challenge, labor challenge? I got to tell you, I think I used to work in retail. That's where I started.
Yeah.
And my God, long hours, lots of work, lots of pressure, but it was a lot less complicated than today. I mean, today they're fulfilling orders.
Yes.
They're required to know more. They've got to do a tap dance, right? They've got to have entertainment. There's all sorts of stuff. I mean, is there support out there for them or?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think that, so one of the things and this is real time, I came away with from NRF was that we're starting to see, and the ideas started to percolate at CES, was we're starting to see certain tech companies becoming platforms. And it was most visible to me in the Zebra booth. And I took all these photos because it was interesting. Zebra wasn't talking about Zebra. Zebra was talking about all these other companies like Sync and, they even had Salesforce and Lowe's and, all these other companies who are leveraging the Zebra platform to do more. And Zebra's made some really interesting acquisitions. So they acquired my old company, Profitect. Then they did Fetch Robotics. Then they did Reflexis, which is workforce management. And they just did Elo. And we've been waiting for electronic shelf labels to come to the U.S. because, Bret,
they've been all over Asia for I don't know how long.
Forever. And it goes back to, you talk about how employees spend their time. I mean, they're still tearing the little things to stick in the new prices. And so, I remember when Target, it was one of those things you just took a moment and just paused. They're like, wow, if we perforate it, we save people 2 hours, the individual employee 2 hours. I'm like, wow, who would have thought of perforating, right? And they're doing this all day, every day. And so with electronic shelf labels, you can now start to do also dynamic pricing and retail media.
Yes.
And so I think it's the beginning of bringing the store to life and going back to, if it's on like that Zebra platform and you've got, I mean, at the show, they had 20 different technology companies who they were showcasing, mind you, all the others who weren't even there. That, like, I felt excited, right? Like I was like, we're on the cusp. And I think that we start to see that in 26 with some of these platform technology companies who I would never have thought of Zebra as being that, but they've done it and they've done it really well.
Yeah. I mean, that is a testament to the new kind of marketing characteristics. You don't specifically talk about you because people are like, hey, we expect you to do that. We were at a convention for a Israeli printing company about a year ago. And it was this amazing convention because they talk so little about themselves. They brought in collaboration and how the impact is happening on a bigger scale and help and aid in marketing. And I was just like, what a brilliant way to go about this, because people understand the impact. And so Zebra understands that they can tell people about all these different kind of peripherals. They're explaining the impact and they don't really have to push their name as much. It's a lot more clear to the customer.
It's funny. And it's so funny because I literally, because we work with them, obviously, since we're analysts, we're also working with analyst relations. And I said, it may sound simple to you. I said, but the fact that just of how you put your booth together, right? That you have like your partners. And then I said, you've made it so easy for us as analysts to understand the impact that you have. And they were like, so, and it goes back to, they're like, thank you so much. Right. Like, and I was like, but I said, but do this next year too. Right. Like, don't be like, take this seriously, because it's like, it goes back to, like you said, and right. They work across healthcare and manufacturing and many other industries, but to be able to kind of see it and instantaneously understand it. Right. Yeah. I was in the booth for an hour and I walked away and I didn't have to do, I mean, of course, like you continue to read and stay up on things, but I understood it unequivocally. Whereas others, like I was like, oh, I gotta take notes and I've got to, like, grab if there's any flyers or whatever so I can go back and do my homework. But there I was like, I left and I'm like, I get it. So I thought that was a very bright star in my NRF experience.
Yeah, a note for future marketing. That's the way to do it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As we take a look at another angle of AI, there are a lot of people out there that are just truly excited about the opportunity that it can bring to their business. There are other people that are absolutely terrified about it taking over the world. We've seen some dynamic shifts in retail lately. Initially, there were some fear in implementation, concern over costs, complexity, implementation process, all of those things. And, we're hearing more companies slowly come to the table to embrace this. What would you say to those that are on the worried side, afraid that AI is going to replace their jobs?
Well, I think that if you look at, I think it's twofold. I think it's a question we have to take very seriously. I mean, I will say we at Coresight implemented an editorial GPT to literally check for commas and semicolons and stuff like that. And just making sure we were using because our team is global, that we were using like American English. Mm-hmm. And our entire editorial team was like, oh, they don't need us. They don't want us. And that was not at all what we had communicated. So it's, sometimes too, no matter how much you tell people you need them, you want them, right? There's
a fear still.
Yeah. I mean, I've lived it, so I can talk from that perspective. I do think it's interesting, T-Mobile, I think, has done an excellent job also on the platform side. But if you think about this idea of like connectivity, which I have to be honest, I don't think I realized, but they said it on stage, so I'm allowed to repeat it. Columbia, right, the outdoor kind of the outerwear company. I have my jacket, Columbia, with the
big outdoor sports brand.
Exactly, They do great. They were saying that on Black Friday they had fiber cut and lost connectivity to stores, and they said on Black Friday stores are doing $10,000 an hour. So if you think about, if you don't have a backup, right, you can't connect to a satellite or anything like that, you're truly down. I mean, you're doing stuff, and if you don't have mobile POS, depending on how that's connecting, right, you start to think about some of the challenges. And so when you look at it, what I found is if we can look at it from a constructive perspective, right, where it helps as opposed to where it hurts, I feel like employees start to think about, oh, okay, and we can do retail media now, right? There are other reasons why this is a huge opportunity. And I think so. It was interesting being at CS. Samsung talked about this idea of like liberation from housework. The average American does like 2.5 hours of housework a day. And so like we saw LG had like this shirt folding robot, which went so-so in the demo, unfortunately in front of everybody. And but you started to see, right, but they were all single purpose. And what you started to realize is that for a very long time, right, these aren't going to be all-knowing robots, right? They're going to do one thing. They might fold your laundry. They might put your dishes in the dishwasher. They might like sweep your floor. But right, you're going to need to have like, I was like thinking about, I'm like, I'm going to need to have a bigger apartment for all the robots, right? It's not just the robot that's like vacuuming your floor or mopping your floor now. And so you start to think about that. And I'm like, it's just going to take a lot longer. And I also think when it comes to retail, the most important thing is, right, the customer retailer brand relationship. We're advising our clients to put even more people in the store to 100%. Build that. And so
there is a backlash to being separated. COVID separated us all. People want connection. We're human beings, and if you want real brand integrity and connect and movement and loyalty and experience, it's people to people. I still think it's still people to people.
I agree 100%. So I think that when it comes to retail and stores, and then I think if we can get supply chain kind of ignited, I think we're going to see I think we're going to go into a few year, I mean, as an investor, I'm thinking and looking at retail in a very different way. I mean, I think there's a lot of tailwinds.
And the reality is that some jobs will be replaced by AI and technology, but that's happened for a long time, and it moderates to a new opportunity. There's new jobs out there created by the technology. So, I mean, I think a lot of that fear is a little unwarranted. Certain people might be impacted, but there's an evolution as it goes. My son just bought that robot, by the way, that is supposed to clean your entire house, or he's on the list for the robot.
That's supposed to come this summer.
Yeah, he's all over it. He's spending the outrageous fortune, and his hope is that he never has to do laundry or dishes ever again. And,
you start to think about all that time that you get back. I mean, it was interesting. A lot of people were saying, oh, there's going to be a lot more people going to the malls, right? There's going to be a lot more, right? Like some of freeing us up from some of these, less than enjoyable activities will then give us hopefully a little bit more leisure time, which once again, I think ends up being good for retail.
Agreed. You just brought up a little while ago this whole dynamic pricing and electric price tickets and all that stuff that's going on. And, in a world that we still have about 30 to 40% sold on markdown, and then costs increasing with tariffs, then you also have labor, raw material, and shipping costs going up. How is AI helping to maximize this profitability, ensure cleaner inventories? You talked earlier about, hey, how is it that we're always out of stock? But the opposite side is, how is it that we always have way too much of stuff we don't want? I mean, there's all these challenges, and if we don't get smarter about our retail environment and our retail inventory and our markdown strategies, that slim margin, 3% pre-tax profit in brick and mortar is going to become slimmer, and really that's not sustainable. Anything happening out there for that, or that you think about?
I mean, I know you had the chance to speak to her too, which was Janice Wang from Alvanon.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, I actually stayed in Hong Kong an extra day to spend with her because, and I've known Janice a long time, but right where their technology is going, I mean, they used to be like a a mannequin company.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's so, you're like, okay, I don't need to stay an extra day. But she had said something like, basically, she's like, we've just seen some really interesting data and we've done some really interesting case studies. And so she talked about, and the data is publicly available, that one of the Zara brands, they ended up figuring out, right, because return rates are through the roof this year. Last year it was like 49%.
$1 billion or $1 trillion in returns this year.
Oh my
trillion.
gosh.
It's crazy. And like the return, I think that the return windows are still, right, like it's till Jan 31. So we still haven't seen, so I'm sure it'll be over, it could be the first year over 50%. And so Janice was saying that even if you're a conscientious shopper, right, and you're trying to get the right fit and get the right color, that part of the problem is, and it was funny, I've never heard anyone boil it down like this because she's probably the one who figured it out, is that, she's like, have you shopped online? Of course you have, right? Have you looked at the size guide? Of course, right? And you're like measuring. So you get your size and you get the garment and it doesn't fit at all. And so she said the challenge is, right, is that there's a different model for QA and then there's a different fit model. So you literally have potentially, and I'm like, that, first of all, that explains so much.
Mm-hmm. Why
nobody else has figured that out before, I don't know. But that was one of those things I was like, this is kind of, a big aha moment, I think, for many. And right, like she's just starting to kind of tell her story, which I think she probably needs help telling it, because it's one of those, you're just like scratching your head. How could this possibly be?
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. I have a little bit of soapbox on that. And I talked to Janice about this too. I just feel like, in the old days, this whole vanity sizing worked great because we could walk in and try stuff on and feel great that, I'm in a size 32 jean, and I'm 275 pounds and 6'4", but I've lost weight, right? And I feel great. As we go online, it works against us. And fit is so subjective from brand to brand, and there is no consistency. And I said, companies like you, and I've spoken to a couple other, form fit scanning technology companies to the same thing. The industry is desperate for a North Star. We have more information at our fingertips from scanning humans around the world, data sets by demographic and customer and race. And we have so much information, yet it in the end, it boils down to, well, here's what we suggest, and you have to work on that. It's like there needs to be someone to say, look, here's the body type for the particular demographic. You can mess with ease however you want. It can be comfortable, it can be tailored or whatever, but follow this body type. This is what we have, because if we don't figure this out, this still will remain a huge issue. And I know that we've got LiDAR technology and scanning things, and a good friend of yours is working on that whole process. But I feel like there needs to be some consistency. It was okay when we could go on and try stuff on, but when you're having it, shipping and returning is insane today because of that very matter.
Yeah, I agree. It's such a huge opportunity, and
huge.
Feel like so many folks have tried and they feel like they failed just because they didn't get the pickup that they wanted. But I think it goes back to, I think it's really explaining what needs to be done and then trying to execute it. So I thought that was one of those really interesting kind of moments. And, fit is just, it's, first of all, like you said, it is subjective, and it's also even just organizations having less waste internally. So I think there's a huge opportunity there.
Yeah. I think there's an opportunity from a consumer education standpoint there too. I mean, I do believe that it's the brand's responsibility to do right by their fit, and transparency, consistency, all those things. But boy, what an opportunity to educate the consumer that there's this amazing technology behind it.
Let's talk about something I know that's kind of near and dear to your heart, at least lately. We've been involved in a few conversations with you about AI and supply chain and sourcing. So, we've never experienced a time in U.S. history that I'm aware of with this geopolitical turmoil. It's creating real complexities in sourcing and supply chain. You mentioned it at the top of the conversation, tariffs being one of those things, the volatility, the unknown, minute or hour that tariffs are up or down or left or right. And then we have over 1 billion small parcel packages that are coming into the US per year. I can see it. The last mile is congested. Delivery times and service are strained, and it's visible. I mean, even Amazon, where it's like, you know,
we had 3 deliveries today from Amazon.
Yeah, and it was supposed to be delivered 3 days ago.
Yeah.
We have overnight delivery, then it's like, oh, by the way, it's next Tuesday. You're seeing this challenge. I know you spent a lot of time thinking about this whole last mile and navigating some of this space. I know some of that's a big topic, but let's zero in a little bit on supply chain, because finding the right country at the whim of tariffs is difficult. So that's a bigger conversation that we can go to today. But the last mile conversation, tell me about what your thoughts are after, you know, you've kind of engaged in those conversations in 2025. Do you see progress? Do you see an ability? Do you see that we're going to hit a wall here real quickly? How are you feeling?
I mean, I think there's always been the fear that you literally like pull on a thread in supply chain and it just all kind of, you know, the whole garment comes apart, which is very understandable because a lot of this is legacy systems, right? Probably half of it's not even documented or more. And the really interesting aspect of CS was a lot of the chip companies talking about this as a huge area of opportunity for them. And I specifically had the opportunity to sit down with Intel more than once because it's like once they said it, I was like, I've got to chase this. And I'll tell you, something that used to take, let's say it was 3 to 5 years to do even like basic supply chain overhaul. They're talking about being able to do it in half that time and at a much lower cost without the risk. And it goes back to there's just a significantly greater amount of compute power at, you know, a fraction of the cost. And this ability to kind of see everything, right, is and Intel's now doing software and hardware. And so, right, like they can literally do it end to end, which was also kind of for me like a jaw dropper. And I just think that there's, number one, a lot of retailers think they're doing it great, but I think
they're not.
They're not. And I think there's going to become a rude awakening when we see someone who, and I think we will see somebody, I believe in the next 6 months, who's like, I'm in, because the excitement we saw, we did this private tour at CS with Intel, and it was so funny because someone's like, oh, isn't it just a bunch of laptops? We literally were like dragging people out because the next group had to go in because it was so interesting. And I love it. Like those, I mean, you guys know me. I love it when you find these stories that everyone thinks is one thing, but it's something else.
Yep.
And I think, right, they've got a new CEO. They've had a lot of CEOs. So we shouldn't shy away from like the fact. But I think that the way that they're thinking now is focusing on a few industries and what's like, I think they like to solve difficult problems, and supply chain is the most difficult.
Yeah, it is.
And so if you can get one, I mean, right, when I started in this industry, right, it, you know, everybody was running on like one tech company, and that made it easy because they're all like, oh, this is who we work with for supply chain. And I think Intel can be that company. It's just a matter of them kind of getting out there and saying like, this is what we're going to focus on in retail, but they can do it in like retail and manufacturing and healthcare. I mean, there's a lot of industries that have a lot of challenges. I mean, think about it in hospitality and in kind of quick service, supply chain, right? Like if you're making a burger and you don't have the lettuce, that's a problem, right? I mean, it's just, so I think we could have so much less waste. We could pay our employees better, right? Like, I think there's so many positives that could come out of this. And it's just, and I do think we'll see something in the next 6 months. I mean, it's such a challenge. And I think it's such an opportunity to be able to finally fix what's really, really broken.
Agreed. You know, this last mile thing, it's so weird because it crystallized in my mind years ago. I was in college. I was a waiter in a restaurant. a new waiter, super inexperienced. And I would go out and I'd have my station. I'd run out and I would take an order and I'd run all the way to the back and get the drink and put the order and run out to the second table. And I was always in, quote, the weeds. That was the term. You were always behind. And a really smart gal that had been a waitress for a long time said, Bret, you're doing this wrong. You're treating each table individually. You're running out, running back. You're spending a lot of time. You need to treat all your 5 tables as one table. You go to the first table, you take the order. The second table, you take the drink. Or the third table, you drop the check. Third, next table, you do that. Every time you go out, you hit all the tables. And I was like, oh my God. And the minute I did that, everything moves so much smoother. And that's kind of this analogy for this last mile supply chain. Everyone's doing things independently. You're seeing delivery trucks side by side in our neighborhood, delivering to the same address side by side. And I'm like, they're doing exactly
the same
what
brand of delivery truck,
and so you've got increased expenses. You have all this inefficiency built into the last mile. And, when we met last year, you had a nice dinner with a last mile technology kind of new company. And it was so interesting. And it got me excited because I'm like, and we had last mile technology on the program last year too. And the idea that we could consolidate it and that you could run routing where everyone's going in this one direction. We're treating it, as one table, if you will, should help solve some of these issues. Do you see that people are ever going to get that organized and work between the lines regardless of the organizations? And is that happening in technology?
Yeah, that is happening. So it goes back to, it's funny you bring this up because this was something I had not expected to hear in 26, but I would say probably a half a dozen companies have said to me that they're starting to work with DoorDash. And that is, and all positive. Every single company had positive things to say. Then, Walmart, with this whole idea of retail as a service, they're now doing last mile for a lot of companies, including like Home Depot, who you would think would be a competitor. And so I do think we're starting to see very much at the surface, because once again, these are a lot of new conversations. But I do think companies are trying to figure out, how do you make this like a less variable cost?
Yeah.
And it's, I think that I really like the waiter and tables example, because I think that really crystallizes the challenge.
Yeah, it is. It's so inefficient today. And if we can just streamline that. And so I guess when we have our conversation about 2026 with Deb in 2027, hopefully
we'll check on the progress.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, some of the themes from this conversation are, talking about efficiency for employees and, taking advantage of the routes and so forth. This really supports desires to be better on sustainability and better with, carbon neutrality and some of those things. The world, many countries are very serious about addressing these concerns. The U.S., we might be on a temporary hiatus, but, there are people that still care. But Europe has really taken a big stand here.
Even the digital passport conversation.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So are there some technologies that are really helping these companies as they're trying to, embrace solutions that, really help navigate?
And you're seeing that as even a conversation today in the U.S.,
Much less so. I will say that because I think what happened, is that, and I started to talk, when I was at different board meetings, I'm like, you're spending all of these dollars to be more sustainable, but what you're spending is outweighing what you're saving. So like the scale is off. Yeah. And I was just like, that's kind of not the whole idea behind this. And I think that, there's a few topics, AI is one of them, cybersecurity, and I think sustainability is another, where you can get competitors in a room together to share how they're doing things. But I think it's like, we had retailers who kind of were selling their previously loved merchandise on their website. We had them, right, like they've thought about lighting and refrigeration and some other things. But ultimately, I mean, we haven't really had a retail on an earnings call who's been like, wow, we invested all this money in sustainability and we got this kind of ROI or this, that, or the other.
Yeah.
It's just not happened. And so I'm all for.
And that's the thing that I think slows it down, because it's an expense. And I think in reality, what we should be talking about with technology and AI is that if we have AI help us make better choices in inventory, we're not filling landfills, and your ROI is right there. You don't have a ton of markdowns in the end. You know, the efficiency and the understanding of inventory levels, the efficiency and understanding of supply chain, last mile. If all of these things get implemented, you're burning less carbon credits, you're filling less landfills, you're focusing it on all of these different details. And I don't think they put the puzzle together yet to say, man, if we invest in some of these technologies, we're not making, to your point, kind of wild decisions that you're not in inventory on some things and you're way over inventoried filling landfills around the world with bad decisions, then in the end, you do kind of put another nail or another benefit toward, a sustainability initiative. Right?
I think that's the holy grail.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah, I think reframing the conversation is helpful, because so many people think, green costs green, right? It's just,
I haven't heard that. That's a good one. No, that's a good one. I think you're exactly right. I think originally it was this huge opportunity, and then you'd have to bring in the consultant, and the consultant would do a full audit.
And God forbid we get hit with greenwashing because we didn't do something perfectly right. And yeah.
So I think it kind of is taken a bit of a detour, but I do think that it goes back to, if we can fix supply chain, right, and we can get the right product to the right location and the right quantity, then it will kind of fix itself without it being for the purpose of sustainability, more for profitability.
And I think that that's the way to frame it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about omni-channel profitability. We were in New York with you a couple weeks ago, and this is a big kind of conversation, this sheer complexity of omni-channel, who's responsible for what task. The costs are always hotly debated. 85% all business is still happening in brick and mortar. Very low margins, and the balance is 15% online. Margins are higher if managed properly. Returns still, like we talked about, exceed $1 trillion annually. Where are we now with retailers with respect to delegation and profitability or channel cost? Is there implementation strategies that you're suggesting to clients to look at? Because I think people are realizing you've got to blend the channels today to really see the accurate picture.
I mean, this is, I think, could be one of the most interesting and fun areas. I mean, I look at live streaming as pulling it together, because then you're really thinking about selling potentially your store inventory, but through an e-commerce channel. So things have to line up a little bit better. And so you're taking, it is quite simple, right? You are using you could use Zoom if you want to, for all I care, right? To sell merchandise, as long as people have a way to pay you, and you can literally pick, pack, and ship. And so you can certainly sell store inventory, right? If somebody's in store, a lot of times you don't have the depth of what you need. We find that that's usually an e-commerce sale, but oftentimes there's a physical component to it. And I think it goes back to, there have been several retailers who've really kind of leaned into this, but I think they've also added a lot of cost. And to me, right, going back to the stores, and like you talked earlier about, which I thought was a really important topic around job security, right? I've always thought there was an opportunity to elevate store associates. I mean, you go to Europe, right? It's a career.
Absolutely right.
And I think that
certainly Japan, by the way, if you look at retail in Japan, that's a model people are starting to relook at.
Yeah. And so I think it goes back to, if we can start to train them, enable them to do live selling in the stores, whatever that looks like. I've seen several different models. And we use the store associates because going back to what I said earlier, they're there because they love the brand. They love like the clothes, and they know the brand better than any creator for the most part or influencer. And so I just think that we could see this evolution or revolution where we see more live streaming. It brings the store alive, going back to like that excitement in stores and physical. We then have a way, the retailers almost have to lean into blending online and offline in a way that they probably aren't right now. And I think it can take costs way down, because what we see is when someone buys something alive, the return rates are 50% less, because you're able to ask a real human being like, oh, does the bag have pockets on the outside? Is it a zipper pocket? Is it like a slip pocket? What's the drop on the bag? Right? Like, oh, and jewelry
does
is
it fit a cell phone? Yeah.
But it's really, and even just colors, right? Like it could be, is that like a really bright blue? Is it more of an indigo, right? Like it's just, and I think there's something more satisfying about it, because you kind of know when you make that purchase, you don't have to worry about it. And even with fit, right? Sometimes some of them will have like models in different sizes. And so it's like, okay, can Sally come out in this dress in a size, whatever. So I think everyone's got to experiment and figure out what's right for them. But I think that we're closer, going back to the technology, especially going back to like some of the T-Mobile stuff, what they're doing to like, because you need the connectivity in the store for this to work. I think we're closer than we are farther away, which I mean, it's $798 billion in China, and we're like $35 billion in the US. These are big dollars.
Such
Look, Deb,
opportunity.
we have 2 questions left, but I have to ask you this, because you are the smartest person in every room. It is my firm opinion. And as long as I have known you, gamification and live streaming, like there should be pins on your chest. These are kind of mantras you've said. And being the smartest person in the room, and I don't think I'm alone when I share that. What the hell's going on that so few people in the West they're missing this, right?
Yeah.
They're not embracing it. You talk about it all the time, and people know how smart you are. So what's happening?
Yeah.
We don't have the platform. So how I would suggest we do it in the US, because we don't really have a platform like we did in China at the beginning with Taobao. There's so many different platforms, and they're all, and none of them is kind of perfect. And right, in retail, we like things to be perfect. So what I would strongly...
It's never perfect.
It never is. But I would strongly suggest, because I would like to see the retailers getting traffic on their website, is that they stream from their own property, either physically or digitally. And if you know as a consumer that there is content there 24/7, and it can be, and so this is the difference. In the United States, you can play old content, right? You can play previously live events. That's the big difference also between China and the US. Right now, most brands that we work with in China are live streaming between 8 and 10 hours a day. So and in the US, I would say it's on average about, if we look across, it's still probably closer to an hour, if that, just because we do work with some that are doing quite a bit. But I think that it goes back to, I think you kind of have, it's okay / you should use your store associates. It's okay, you should use your own property, right? So now you've just taken out a huge amount of cost and complexity, but they're also the right things to do. And so,
how do they not see this? There's Home Shopping Club in QVC that in essence does that all the time, broken down by scientific metrics to the word that is being said, constantly being streamed, and they do unbelievable amounts of dollars. How is no one connecting that to a more broad-based live streaming concept?
Oh my gosh, you like, Bret, this is why I love you guys, because I mean, hey, I understand that my mother...
It's in our face. It's been in our face forever.
Yeah. I understand that QVC is where my mother and my grandmother probably shopped. It doesn't matter. I would happily shop there. And so I think that they have a bit of a... I think they have like a complex about that. And I'm like, it's great. You guys have phenomenal technology. Probably some of the best.
Unbelievable.
Going back to platforms, why can't everybody instead, right, like... if you're Whatnot or if you're why can't they all then be on? So I think like you call it like Q or something, and
Right.
I think that there's huge opportunity there. On the gamification side, we're still really early. I mean, I was running around malls in China.
Come on, everyone's playing games, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there has to be some way to.
Well, and it's funny, I have here somewhere in my hotel room, I've even got like the new Meta Ray-Bans and whatnot. And so I think that through like AR, right, you could bring the stores to life. I don't think we're going there anytime soon, but you can do that, right? Like, I mean, going back to, like I said, 2015, I'm in like malls in Shanghai, like catching red packets that had real value. And you know what?
Right.
I probably spent 5 more hours and a lot more money in the mall as a result. It works, right? The data shows that it works. I think that in retail, also, if you're private versus you're public, I think it's a lot easier because, and I love what Gap is doing and American Eagle, where I think they're both investing a lot in trying new things.
They need to. Gap should be America's company, so hopefully Zach's going to figure something out there. I mean, I'm seeing some freshness. So
yeah, and I think that you have seen a lot of companies, right, like acquired by ABG and WHP and some of the other brand aggregators, and so I think if you're out of the public eye, you can test and try more. So I'm hopeful, and if investors see the value, which I think that they're starting to get there. I think we're opening the door for a lot more experimentation, enjoyment, fun. And I think that we'll start to see, I think we're going to scratch the surface in 26. I don't think we're going to go kind of like all in, but I think it's going to definitely be more than what we've seen in the past. And that's exciting.
The infrastructure's there.
Yeah.
I mean, for experiential retail, we don't need another movie theater. Team up with an existing game developer and gamify retail.
Right. That would be fun. Deborah, you mentioned a little bit ago, you were talking about, influencers and so forth and the alignment with the brand. So you're now starting to kind of talk about marketing, which is an area that is near and dear to my heart. Marketing is seeing a big shift. It's expensive. There's a desire for more and more and more content creation. Yet, like all of these platforms online and socially are just inundated with it. What are some new solutions that are coming to the table to, again, kind of add freshness into...
Cut through the damn noise.
To marketing challenges?
We're seeing a lot of retail media, and it's still early. I was in a Tractor Supply store, and it's in very few stores, and they had these screens, and I'm not somebody who watches a ton of TV. So also I was literally just staring because it was so beautiful. And I'm like, I know the product. I know where to find it. I'm being educated on it. So I feel smarter. And it's like purely enjoyable to be in here because it's just, it really was beautiful. I have to be honest.
I remember what you're talking about. It's almost documentarian style.
Yeah. And so I think that the great thing about retail media is it's incredibly lucrative for retailers, and it then allows them to invest in other things. It's just a matter of, there's been a lot of hits and misses. And so, there's companies like Swiftly, which I think has just done some really interesting things in terms of how they like rebate and they have tons of data on how they rebate the customer, how the customer, kind of acts. One of the things they've said, it was really interesting. Like I always learn a lot from Sean Turner's, one of the founders, is that there's a lot of, we will once again spare the guilty, consulting companies who've built retail media platforms that are incredibly expensive. And as a result, right, and that's at a point in time. So 12 months later, 24 months later, those aren't really relevant. And so I think that while retail media is a huge opportunity, I think that it's not necessarily been realized as much as it will be. And so to me, not only is it good from an advertising perspective, bringing the store to life, and I'm talking like off platform, like in a physical store. And then going back to Bret, a question you asked earlier about how do you kind of bring online and offline together? I do think retail media is that piece. But it goes back to, I think more than a few retailers invested a lot of money in probably something that seemed like a great idea at the time. But now you've got companies like Swiftly that can do it fast and cheap. And I'm a very frugal person in my personal life and professional life. I like fast and cheap all day long and good, right? Like if you got the data. And so I think that there's and some of these companies, right, they always expect the data to talk to them for themselves. Like they got to get out there and be louder, right? Because it's really interesting. And so I'm hoping we're going to see more of that in 26.
That's great. Yeah. Finally, the big question. We're at the end. We have now had another masterclass with Deb Weinswig.
Yes.
And we always appreciate the time. My God, I know how busy you are. What actually works versus hype? Brands and retailers are concerned about the costs, not clear on the real results. Vaporware is everywhere. What AI delivers ROI today in this space? What are you recommending? Because there's just so much out there. And we talked about the paralysis of retailers and brands today because there's a lot of offerings, but they're like, man, implementation and costs are expensive. And at the end, it's a big dud. Then, oh my God, we'd rather not tread in that space. What do you recommend?
It's interesting because I think that there's a lot that's really expensive and takes a lot of time to implement. So those are kind of two of the things that I think are expensive and takes a lot of time are both not positive. I think that
I would be out of business if somebody said, hey, tell me about your product. Well, it's expensive and it takes a lot of time.
And so I think that is those are some of the challenges that we're seeing across the board. And so if I were to do one thing, I'd probably make sure that it worked in kind of like physical retail, because that's where, as you said at the very onset, Bret, we're still seeing most of the traffic. And so I think that is kind of like really, really important. I think anything we can do, right? Like I love the electronic shelf labels. Yes, it's an investment, but it's not a huge one. And it's kind of once and done. I think retail media in stores. And then I think live streaming. I mean, I think this idea of bringing the store to life. I mean, I wish I could push the gamification button and it would work. I mean, we saw some.
Let's just get live stream going, for God's sake. Let's get half of your vision for the world solved.
That's exactly right. So I think that if I look at it, we had a lot of noise in 25. I think retail survived for the most part.
Yeah.
We now have a lot of these big chip companies who are really focused on retail because it's, the second largest industry after healthcare. And, that excites me and gives me like clarity of vision. And then I think that we've got a lot of, I think almost permission for whether it's CIO, CTO, CDO to go out and experiment, but to be mindful that we either want to use AI to pay for AI, or you could look at retail as a service, data monetization, or retail media. But this idea that we're not going to go kind of like spend with abandon, we're going to be disciplined from an OpEx and CapEx perspective. And so that I haven't seen that all of that kind of coming together ever. And I think that just doing a few things really well will give investors, kind of pause to push, valuations higher, which will then ultimately allow the retailers to invest more. So I think we're at the beginning. I think we're at the beginning of a supply chain cycle. That's really what I think. And I think it goes back to even when we talk about, right, like Bret, this whole idea of online and offline and bringing that together, that's all part of that. And so I think we're in the early days, but the tech is there and it's affordable. And that really lays out a great story for retail for 26.
That's great. And I shouldn't have to say this, but as you're thinking about all of these implementation steps, in 30 years, maybe 30 plus years of time I've been in this business, I have never met anyone like Deb. And I think that being involved with Coresight Research and Deb and making those decisions is going to save you a lot of pain. I remember the times we made mistakes when I was at a $3 billion retailer. I remember the times that we made mistakes in terms of manufacture and working on supply chain and all the craziness that happens. Having someone that is as smart and as informed and can time travel, by the way, I'm still convinced she can time travel, is super important because it's going to save you lots of cost and time. She thinks through this stuff really, really intensely. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I've loved getting to know you guys. You always think ahead of the market. And that's incredibly valuable because I think having the two of you push the rest of us, it just makes the industry work better. And so I think it's a true partnership in terms of working together to help the industry. And I think that 26 is going to be a really important year for that.
That's
Absolutely.
Great.
Well, thank you so much. That's exactly why we're here, helping to share ideas and forward progress in the industry. So thank you, Deborah, for joining us. Thank you for joining us today. Do not forget to subscribe to stay apprised of upcoming conversations.